So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name's Andrew Komarow, certified financial planner. I have a few other letters after my name as well. Joined here by attorney Kathleen Hayes. And we wanted to host this ABLE account presentation because we realized it's been a little while since we've done a presentation on ABLE accounts. And we also wanted to provide the opportunity to a walkthrough afterwards of an on-screen separate walkthrough of I'm going to open an ABLE account just to go through so people can visually see what the process is like for opening an ABLE account. Kathleen and I have done so many ABLE account presentations together. We could probably do them in our sleep or close to it. We try to make this fun and engaging and interactive, so we encourage people to ask questions along the way. I can't guarantee we will answer them right away, but we do encourage this to be a bit interactive. I'm told it's the most entertaining of a similar topic that people have attended, but we also want it to be good information as well. Want to mention that a lot of the information that we're going to cover is Connecticut specific. Kathleen is a Connecticut admitted attorney. I, as a financial planner, can work almost anywhere. The vast majority of what applies here, with some exceptions, will work for other states. So if you are attending us and you're not in Connecticut and you have questions on how your specific situation applies, feel free to reach out. But the important thing to know is that in other states, they usually have something similar or fairly equivalent. But I do think we have a lot of people from Connecticut joining as well. The only other thing I want to add is that we do cover a little bit of history with what we're going to cover. And what we found is it was almost more important to talk about the reason for considering an ABLE account before how to open one and why. The first time we did a presentation on ABLE accounts, I can't believe it's only been 2 years. It feels like a decade. Last year certainly increased that quite a bit. But what found was that, people are like, well, here's my situation. Does an ABLE account make sense? So really going into some of the government benefit programs we found is extremely important for whether an ABLE account makes sense, because the main reason people open an ABLE account is to qualify and maintain government benefit programs. So it's helpful to know, well, what are government benefit programs? We promise we definitely get into ABLE accounts and also do a little comparing and contrasting on special needs trusts, assuming we have time. And then, like we said, if everyone wants to hang around, we're going to go a little extra, and I'm going to go through the opening of an ABLE account all online and how you're able to do that.
Great. All right, so good evening and thank you everybody for joining us. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Kathleen Hayes. I have a law practice in Glastonbury, Connecticut, focused on planning for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. So we're going to start the presentation with some background, as Andrew mentioned, and where we really begin is with government benefits. And the reason for that is because we're starting with the why. Why would somebody need an ABLE account? And the answer to that is in order to qualify for or to maintain eligibility for government benefits, also known as public benefit programs that have low asset limits. So the types of government benefit programs might be a cash benefit. And tonight we're going to talk about the difference between Supplemental Security Income, SSI, and Social Security Disability Insurance and the Disabled Child Rule. We're also going to discuss the difference between Medicaid and Medicare and the type of Medicaid services that have low asset limits. And we also want you to be aware, but we're not going into this evening, So the benefits relative to housing as well as food benefits. So it's just important to be aware that there are other public benefits available that cover different services beyond the cash and the medical benefits that we're going to discuss in more detail right now. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about supplemental security income. This is the biggest benefit that I see, and I think Andrew would agree that he sees, that pairs very well with an ABLE account. Whether somebody is applying for SSI and they need an ABLE account to be financially eligible from the outset, or whether somebody has SSI and they're looking to fund an ABLE account in order to stay within the resource limit. So SSI is a monthly cash benefit for individuals who meet a two-pronged test. First is that the individual has a disability, which is defined by Social Security as a medical impairment that's impacting somebody's ability to work or to be substantially gainfully employed. And the individual has $2,000 or less in an account with their name on it, whether it's their own name or a joint name. The $2,000 limit, however, does not apply to funds that are held within an ABLE account. So an ABLE account, as we're going to go through, makes extra money over that $2,000 resource limit invisible, which is why we often see people that are enrolled in or applying for SSI creating ABLE accounts in order to meet that $2,000 limit. If someone's eligible for SSI, that individual receives a maximum monthly benefit of $794 a month, and that goes up, increases with cost of living every January. However, that maximum benefit can be reduced if someone else, say for example, a parent, is paying for the individual's food, or they're allowing the individual to live with them rent-free. Those types of things are called in-kind support and maintenance. Social Security does not look favorably when other people are paying for food or subsidizing housing costs for someone with a disability, because they say, well, if they have another resource, then we're going to reduce their benefit by 1/3. I mention this because a rental agreement between a parent, for example, if the individual is residing with a parent, and the SSI applicant, will enable the individual to receive the full benefit without that 1/3 reduction. And in many cases, an ABLE account can be used as a source of payment for that rent. So again, within my practice, I often see the coupling of a rental agreement and an ABLE account in conjunction with this SSI benefit. The next benefits we're going to talk about are Social Security disability insurance and the disabled adult child benefit. These benefits, Social Security disability insurance, is known as SSDI, and the disabled adult child benefit is a form, in essence, of SSDI. SSDI, similar to SSI, is a monthly cash benefit, but it's available to individuals who have worked and who have paid into the Social Security system enough that they have vested work credits. So if they have to leave work due to a disability, they're eligible for a monthly benefit, SSDI, very similar to a Social Security retirement benefit. So SSDI is great for those individuals that are able to work and earn enough work credits to be eligible for this benefit. But that's not the case for everybody. So Social Security has an alternative path called the disabled adult child benefit. This benefit pays out to people that have a disability that started before the age of 22, who haven't necessarily worked themselves, but who have a parent that worked and paid into Social Security. And if that parent is retired or leaves work due to their own disability, the child whose disability started before 22 is eligible for 50% of the parent's benefit. And when that parent dies, 75% of the benefit. You'll see over here, and well, as another caveat, or not caveat, but just as a point to add, that 50% or that 75% for the individual with the disability does not reduce the parent's benefit. It's in addition to. For SSDI and the disabled adult child benefit, there is no asset limit. So this is a really big distinction from SSI, which we talked about on the last slide, where there is an asset test, because these benefits are determined to be entitlements, very similar to Social Security retirement. Somebody paid into Social Security and therefore they've earned the monthly benefit. Also, these benefits don't have a resource limit of $2,000. So that enables an individual to have a lot more flexibility potentially in managing their own resources. And this individual enrolled in these benefits alone do not need an ABLE account per se in order to maintain eligibility, since they are entitlements. And lastly, if somebody is enrolled in either of these benefits, they automatically receive Medicare after 2 years. So that's a huge benefit in terms of additional health insurance supports. Next, we're going to talk about Medicare versus Medicaid, because there's a lot of confusion here. And this is a really great graphic that Andrew worked on to help to compare the differences between Medicare and Medicaid. I want to focus on the overlap. Both Medicare and Medicaid benefit people with disabilities. They may offer prescription drug coverage and outpatient and inpatient hospital coverage. Andrew, if you'd go to the next slide as well, I think I further. Yes, so Medicare and Medicaid are both a source of health insurance. So when you think about health insurance, you traditionally think about doctors, hospitals, and prescriptions. So Medicare is a source of health insurance for people age 65 and older, or individuals enrolled in SSDI or the disabled adult child benefit for 2 years, as we just talked about. Medicaid is a source of health insurance for various categories. So in Connecticut, if you're familiar with the Husky program, Husky, actually just stay on that slide, please. Thanks. Husky is the Medicaid program in Connecticut, and there's 3 Husky doors, and all of those doors lead to health insurance benefits. It's just a matter of which door you go through to get to those benefits. So first we have Husky A, which is health insurance for parents and caregivers and pregnant women who meet low income limits. That's Husky A. Adults ages 19 to 64 who meet low income limits, that's Husky D. And lastly, individuals with disabilities or who are blind, or individuals 65 and over who meet low income and asset limits. That's Husky C. So I bolded this one because we have an asset test for Husky C, which is a source of insurance for people with disabilities. Therefore, an ABLE account can be a very good tool for someone enrolled in Husky C in order to maintain the asset eligibility. In addition to being a source of health insurance, Medicaid is also a source of services and supports. So some examples of those services and supports I'm sure sound familiar to many of you. It's the autism waiver, DDS waivers, brain injury waiver, Katie Beckett waiver, also community first choice. All of these are potential source services and supports for people with disabilities. And in order to access and maintain eligibility for Husky C, for those programs that are offered through Husky C for people with disabilities, an individual can use an ABLE account to meet the Medicaid asset limits. I do want to make one thing clear, is that not all of these programs are, you do not have to be enrolled in Husky C, which has the asset test for all of these programs, but for many of them you do. So it's important to know what Medicaid program you're on to know whether there's an asset test.
And again, most states, whether you stay or move, they have very similar programs. Katie Beckett, Community First Choice. Many states have brain injury and autism waivers. And what we find is that, this is many times the most valuable benefit that somebody can receive. So for example, the autism waiver is $50,000 a year, right? That's much more important than, $800 a month from SSI, right? Many times these services are irreplaceable as far as, the costs are concerned. And Medicaid is what we find can be very important. Kathleen,
Yes,
anything
well said.
before we talk about ABLE accounts?
No, I think we're ready. Okay. So we started with the why. We started with government benefits. Why would someone need an ABLE account? In order to become eligible for or to maintain financial eligibility for these government benefit programs like SSI and Medicaid. An ABLE account, ABLE is an acronym that stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. ABLE accounts are a creature of federal law. So back in 2014, there was a federal law that was created allowing individuals with disabilities who meet the eligibility criteria, which we'll discuss, to create a tax-advantaged savings account that operates to make their money invisible for the purpose of meeting very low asset limits for public benefit programs. These accounts are also often referred to as 529A accounts. That refers to the section as to where the ABLE Act appears within the Internal Revenue Code. It's in section 529A, which is right after 529, educational accounts. So there are some similarities, though also pretty important distinctions between a 529 educational or CHET account, as we call them in Connecticut, and ABLE accounts. I always emphasize to clients that these accounts are operated by the states. So you can't go to People's Bank or Citizens or a credit union and open an ABLE account. You have to open an ABLE account through a state. And many states now, including Connecticut, have ABLE programs that you can create through the state itself. And most can be created online. And Andrew's going to go through tonight and not only open an ABLE account, as he mentioned later, but also later on do some compare and contrast of some ABLE programs that we frequently see our clients using. So why create an ABLE account? Well, we talked about to meet the low asset limits for public benefits like Medicaid Husky C, which has a $1,600 asset limit, unless someone is working, which subjects them to a higher asset limit, and SSI, which has a $2,000 limit. Another reason for SSI recipients is as a source to pay rent, which we talked about earlier. Number 3 would be for the individual to be able to directly access and manage their own funds. And I say here, unlike a first-party special needs trust. So I'm going to talk about special needs trust later on in the presentation, but the idea is that even before ABLE accounts came around, an individual could have money in a special needs trust that would be invisible for benefits. But under the rules of the special needs trust, the individual cannot, as a rule, manage their own money. So when ABLE account came along as an alternative that resolves that issue and allows individuals with disabilities to directly manage the money, meaning that they can make withdrawals and they can decide how to use the money without having to go through a third party or a trustee. And lastly, to save and grow funds tax-free if benefits might be needed in the future. Who is eligible for an ABLE account? So ABLE accounts can be opened for an individual with a disability that started before the age of 26. So first, you see I've underlined disability. Disability has to meet Social Security's definition of disability, which we talked about earlier when we were talking about SSI, which is having a medical impairment that impacts someone's ability to work at a substantially gainfully employed level, or basically competitive employment. If someone is already receiving SSI or even SSDI, they automatically meet that disability definition because Social Security determined they did in order to award them the benefit. However, some people don't have Social Security at the time that they're applying for the ABLE account. So this most often comes up when I have clients that are turning 18 and they're going to apply for SSI, but they have, let's say, $10,000 in their bank account. So instead of saying you've got to spend all that down to get to below $2,000, the individual could open an ABLE account and put the money in it. So in those cases, ABLE accounts can be opened for people that certify that they have a disability that started before the age of 26 that meets Social Security's criteria. And if anyone's in that position, you can certainly reach out to myself or Andrew, because the regulations are pretty clear as to exactly what that certification needs to say in order to be able to prove if Social Security or the IRS ever asked that the individual is in fact eligible for this account. And it typically includes a letter signed by the individual's physician affirming that this criteria is met. Who can establish and or manage an ABLE account? I get this question all the time. Attorneys ask this question all the time in terms of who's allowed to open an ABLE account. The regulations, which were issued, gosh, I don't even remember when, but it was within the last year or so, really clarify this issue. There is a hierarchy of who can open an ABLE account or manage an ABLE account. And the hierarchy means that you have to go in order in determining who can open or manage the account. The first would be the individual with the disability who's the beneficiary of the account. But if that person is unable to open or manage their own account, then next in line is an agent under a power of attorney, a guardian, or a conservator. If the individual doesn't have any of those things, then a spouse, parent, sibling, grandparent, and last in the order is a representative payee who's somebody appointed to manage someone's Social Security benefit. So that's the universe of people that are authorized to open and manage these accounts, and it has to go in that order.
And something to add, and a question that we receive a lot is different states have their own rules for how they interpret it. So for example, in Connecticut especially, lots of questions since Connecticut's established their own is, can a conservator or, a parent who's not open one? And Connecticut might be a little bit more strict, maybe because it's newer in the establishing of the Connecticut ABLE account. But for example, as we'll go through later, of opening an account, Stable, Ohio, has it where you can self-certify the disability, and a parent can open without needing to show the power attorney, the guardian, the conservator. The parent can open the ABLE account. So it's not just a comparison that we'll get into later, but it's very important that if you've run into trouble opening an ABLE account, there could just be how the state interprets the rules, but it's the state where you're opening the account, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
I hope it does to you. Especially everyone else. But
it sounded clear.
Okay, well, that's what matters.
All right. I think this is my last slide before Andrew takes over. How to use an ABLE account. So an ABLE account under the rules has to be used for qualified disability expenses for the individual. So here's a whole list of things that can constitute disability related expenses. And I want to quote, I always look back to the regulations to determine how broadly or narrowly do we have to really define a disability expense. And the regulations actually say they must be broadly construed, and that qualified disability expense means any expense related to the health, independence, or quality of life of the individual. And it should not be so narrowly construed as to mean that other people can't derive some sort of secondary benefit. So for example, an ABLE account can be used for vacation expenses if going on vacation will help the individual's independence or boost their overall quality of life. So Andrew and I generally say if you can think it and it's for the individual with a disability's primary benefit, then it's most likely an allowable use of the ABLE account.
And one thing that did not make it on this list is legal expenses. So you can pay for an attorney as well. And so again, it's very important to, if, let's say it's autism, what aspects of somebody's daily life does autism not, affect? And it's pretty much everything all the time. So you can, it's much harder to find an expense that does not count rather than one that does, or maybe
Right.
vice versa. That's just to see if you were paying attention, if I got it in reverse. Okay.
Yes. And Andrew, there's just one question that I'll just pose to you. Someone asked, someone can open an ABLE account across state lines, correct?
Correct. And so what we find is, sometimes some specific states have some tax advantages. But for the most part, we find that ABLE accounts are a lot about the ease of use to be able to spend the money. And you can open an ABLE account anywhere that will let you open an ABLE account. And if there's rules to your specific state, those rules apply no matter where you open the ABLE account.
Yes, and just to add, to clarify, someone can only have one ABLE account. So if you've opened an ABLE account in one state and you want to then move it to another state, you can roll over your account into the new state. You just simply cannot have two accounts at once.
Correct. And there is a time frame where they give you to be able to move from one to another.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Moving on to everyone's favorite subject. If this wasn't more fun, there's taxes, right? But it's talked about, I would argue, maybe too much, right? And it's important to mention that there are tax advantages to an ABLE account, but I really want to emphasize that's not the main reason an individual should open one, right? Because if an individual's on SSI, SSDI, they're probably in a tax bracket where they're not paying any taxes anyway. These accounts are a lot of empowering the individual to be making their own, financial decisions. On the other hand, having money that grows tax-free instead of taxable is never a bad idea. So I do want to say that, that is an important consideration. Some states will offer a tax deduction only if you do their state. And that's worth considering, especially if it's the parents putting away money, etc. So really look at your own state first for any potential tax advantages before opening in another state. Maryland comes to mind as one that offers tax advantages just to Maryland residents for just the Maryland account.
Andrew, we have a question and you can
Yep.
decide whether now's the right time to answer it or later. An individual said, my son has a 529 account from another state. Is it pretty straightforward to transfer this to an ABLE account in Connecticut?
I mean, I see no reason to transfer one to an ABLE account in Connecticut if you're happy with how it's doing. The ABLE account that we're going to help open online is not even Connecticut, and I'm in Connecticut. I find there's other features that are a bit more relevant. So I guess the question is, I've never seen a reason to transfer money to a Connecticut ABLE account from another state. So it should be, not too time consuming, relatively straightforward, but there's also, again, unless you want to, there is not that big a difference. Most states are part of what's called the ABLE Alliance, including Connecticut. So about half the states use all the same backend system anyway. So the programs are very, very similar. So I do want to just mention that. So,
and just to clarify also, this did say 529 account, not a 529A account.
oh, yes. So yes, I will get to that in a second or in a few slides on 529As. But interrupt me again if I didn't. So I will answer that. So before we answer 529 accounts, there's also something called an UGMA or UPMA. We find these are usually savings accounts that grandparents opened. They're accounts that are for the individual, and they're turned over to that individual when they turn age of majority, which is 18, 21, and the account's turned over to them. We find this is a common area where normally before an ABLE account, you would want to spend down the money. So it's very important to look at money in an UGMA at 18, when somebody's looking to apply for benefits. And it's a very good opportunity potentially to move it into an ABLE account. Even if the individual does not end up qualifying for benefits, they are still receiving the potentially tax-free growth of an ABLE account versus the taxable of the UGMA. So generally speaking, there isn't much a deduction like a 401k. There is some potential for some small local state deductions. Payments that you use for a qualified disability expense that we've established are very liberal, are tax-free. But payments for a non-qualified disability expense are subject to a penalty. It's important to take note that that penalty is only on the money that was made. So if I put in 10,000 into an ABLE account and it grows to 11,000 and I cash it all in to go to Vegas, and I mean, maybe you could argue some of Vegas might be for well-being. I'm not sure, but let's go with that. None of it's a qualified education expense and all the money is lost. Only $1,000, the gain on the $10,000 is subject to that 10% penalty. So that means the penalty would be a whopping $100. That is your account maintenance fee just for the pleasure of doing business with Bank of America, for example. I always like to pick on Bank of America because, well, they have lots of fees. So I just want to say that that 10% penalty exists, but also to keep in perspective that it's not usually significant if it were to be applicable. So we don't want that to stop people from contributing to an ABLE account. I have seen exactly 0 ABLE accounts that are over $100,000. The current limit, at least according to Stable, is $501,000. Now, at over 100,000, SSI is suspended. It's not terminated. It's not lost. They're just saying you have $100,000. You probably don't need the $700-800 a month we're giving you. So we're just not giving it to you. They're not taking away your Medicaid. They're not making you ineligible. So if you have over $100,000 in an ABLE account and you want to contact me, I will give you a list of fun computer things to buy, vacation suspended on, and things to do with it, because that is the solution. But also keep in mind with what Kathleen said earlier, that is, almost everyone receiving SSI will eventually not be receiving SSI. And that is because when their parent retires, becomes disabled, or passes away, that they will be eligible for the DAC, which is more like traditional Social Security, and they will no longer be on SSI. So what we find is by the time an ABLE account might get to that $100,000 mark, there is a very good possibility that the SSI suspension rule won't even matter. So that is very important, and it's only suspended and it's not Medicaid. Many states have a Medicaid payback provision. Now, let's say you're in Connecticut that has one, and you see that Pennsylvania does not have one. You may be thinking, well, I'm just going to open my account in Pennsylvania. It does not work like that. You follow the rules for the state where you opened it. So if somebody in Pennsylvania wanted to open a Connecticut ABLE account, they would still not have to do a Medicaid payback. Now, this is only if Medicaid pays money in the first place. It's very similar to special first party special needs trust. And what we do find is that it is a concern, it is valid. It's one of the more reasons why proper planning is important. You know, when somebody comes to us and they say, I want an ABLE account, one of my first questions, well, why do you want an ABLE account? And that usually opens a whole door. I have a phrase that I've used quite a bit, which is you have to know where you want to go before figuring out how you're going to get there. So it's very important to have a plan in place. And, you know, a special needs trust is not a plan. An ABLE account is not a plan. An investment account or life insurance is not a plan. But all of those things together with the goals and what you're looking to accomplish are a plan. This needs to be updated only slightly because currently, if a beneficiary is working, they can do about $27,000 per year. And that $27,000 is if they are not contributing to a 401k plan. Now, important note, the $15,000 per year cap also applies to transfers from a traditional 529 account. So if you have 30,000 in a traditional 529, you have to transfer that over 2 years. You can't just move the entire amount into an ABLE. However, if you're moving from one ABLE to another, that is a spot where the cap does not apply.
Andrew, just to jump in to clarify, can you speak to who is allowed to contribute to the ABLE account?
If anyone wants to put money in my ABLE account, I will give you the address. So yes, anyone can put money in an ABLE account. However, only one ABLE account can be open for that person at a time. So.
Perfect. There's a couple of questions. I'm just going to answer, I think, 2 of them, and then 2 I'm going to hold off on because I think they're coming up for Andrew. Someone asked, can someone be eligible for the disabled adult child rule benefit if they are no longer claimed as a dependent? Yes, the disabled adult child benefit through SSDI looks at whether the individual had a disability that started before the age of 22 and whether their parent paid into Social Security and is retired, disabled, or deceased. So oftentimes somebody's not eligible for the disabled adult child rule until they're in their 30s or 40s when a parent is otherwise retiring. Somebody else asked, my son has SSDI and is a dependent on my Social Security retirement benefits and SSI. How does this fit into ABLE? You always need to start with what benefits is the person on and ask the question, do these benefits have asset limits? If the answer to that is yes, we need to then know what the limit is. SSI, the limit is $2,000. So in that case, anything over the limits that apply could go into the ABLE account. Who is authorized to withdraw from an ABLE if the account holder requires or has a guardian? So we will share this presentation, or this presentation is recorded and will be available online, so you can even go back and look at the slides. But earlier, when I went through that hierarchy of who can open and establish an account, first it's the individual with the disability, but if that individual has a guardian or isn't able to otherwise open or manage the account, then yes, the guardian would be next in line to be able to manage and open the account. Andrew, I'm just going to tell you the question. Someone's asking, can you have both a 529 plan and an ABLE account? And I believe that's coming up for you. And I'm sorry, I have one more thing to answer on my end. Someone said, my son receives a monthly annuity payment as the result of a lawsuit, and they also get the disabled adult child payment. You're his legal guardian. Can I direct the monthly payment to the ABLE account? It's important to know that you can take your own money and put it into an ABLE account for someone, or you can take the money that was received by an individual, like through a settlement or an annuity, and put it into the ABLE account. You can't direct deposit those things into the ABLE account. And the other thing is that an ABLE account only works to make sure that somebody meets an asset test. Certain benefits also have income tests, and ABLE accounts do not reduce someone's countable income. So the answer to your question is yes, you can take that money that's received and deposited into your son's account and put it into the ABLE account, subject to these annual limits that Andrew was just talking about. And
Great.
that's it for the questions so far.
Yeah. And again, you can have 10 529 accounts in one, ABLE account, right? So, and it's important to know that, and this is for a question that was asked by, again, one person in particular, says the person's receiving SSI and SSDI. If the dollar amount the individual is receiving is over the SSI limit, then they're not receiving SSI anymore. So for example, if you retired and your son is receiving 1,000, then you're getting more than the SSI payment, then you're not receiving SSI. It is possible to receive both SSI and SSDI, but a pretty clear test I would ask that person is, how much is the dollar amount? That just means they may not have the SSI rules to follow, but they should keep in mind the Medicaid rules. There will be a test at the end of this, so I hope everyone is paying attention. And if people say they understand it well, I would be very concerned because, we've been doing this for a long time and we're learning new stuff every day, and it's taken us a lot of time to learn what we're sharing. So if it's confusing in a way, that's good. But hopefully we're breaking it down simply enough, right? We don't expect everyone to be experts on this. So for opening an ABLE account, I think I'm going to go through it a little bit more quickly to spend some time on the trust part, because I can take some of these questions. For example, what's needed? Well, I'm literally going to help open an ABLE account. So let's just kind of skip on through that because we'll be able to watch that live. But it is, it is very relatively simple. You just need basic information, and proof of diagnosis disability might be needed with some states. It's actually not with Stable/Ohio. Funding an ABLE account. Going to make this one simple. However, you can get them money. Now, one caveat to that is, although you can fund an ABLE account with direct deposit, such as putting all of somebody's Social Security money in an ABLE account, I would caution against it. It's because if anyone's ever been audited by the IRS or Social Security or tried to do accounting, they'll realize that a paper trail is very important. And an example would be is if you're receiving, just under $800 a month for Social Security, but then your parent passes away and you're suddenly receiving $2,000 a month from the disabled adult child benefit. Well, Social Security is going to right along keep depositing that money into an ABLE account, putting you well over the $15,000 a year limit. So we very much encourage not to set up direct deposits from either employment or from Social Security into an ABLE account. You can. A better alternative is, if you're getting Social Security on a certain day, to just have a couple days later, have that withdrawn from the same checking account. It creates a nice paper trail that's easy if you're ever asked by Department of Social Services or Social Security Administration. And it'll make your life a little easier in the future. As my wife likes to tell me, just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. And that's important to keep in mind with some of the things that you're able to do. So we did mention about transferring money to an ABLE account. And there was a great question asked that, can you move again from a out-of-state 529 to a 529A? And whether it's Connecticut or not Connecticut, the answer is always yes. But to take some lessons from my wife, should you? And one very common example is a 529 account is looked at very similarly to how you might have life insurance as a beneficiary. So unless the 529 is also an UGMA or UPMA, which is exceedingly rare to do, that The 529 account is owned by the parent, and the parent is allowed to change the beneficiary basically to whoever they want. It's, you know, it's a Mississippi version of family. I mean, it's like third cousin twice removed or something close to that, where you can change the beneficiary. You could change it, the parent could change it to themselves. They could change it to the other sibling. Here is the most important part about all of that. It is not counted as an asset for asset limit tests. So Social Security Administration has a manual that I promise nobody other than me and Kathleen have ever read, and it is called the POMS Procedures and Operations Manual. And there they do explicitly state that a 529 account, it's owned by the parent, even though the beneficiary might be the individual with a disability, and there's a chance it may make sense to move to an ABLE account. It will not affect them for asset limit tests. So if there is, and I had this example last week where there was $30,000 in mutual funds savings, and there was, you know, $100,000 in 529. Well, we should start with the mutual fund to an ABLE account, and we can, you know, look at and evaluate moving the 529 over if it makes sense to do so, but that will not count against an individual. So you do not need to move a 529 plan to an ABLE account to qualify to shield those assets. They already are considered assets of the parent. And how straightforward is it to move one from another state to another? I mean, it should be relatively straightforward, but there is some processing and time. If anyone has ever moved an IRA or a 401k rollover, it's handled very similarly. It can take some time to happen. I generally find the company that you're moving to is incentivized to get more money, so they're usually very helpful. So in general, I recommend two different types of ABLE accounts. Going through a bit quicker, there's Massachusetts, Fidelity. That's the only one available to most residents that has no fee to open and maintain. It can be great if you have a Fidelity account already. However, it can be a bit harder to spend the money. And again, going through this part a little bit quicker because we're going to go through it a little bit later. And Ohio Stable, that was the first ABLE account in the country. They have a much better system for keeping track of expenses. They have a much better system for the debit card, and the ABLE account are actually together. So with Fidelity and many other states, in order to spend the money, you actually need to transfer the money out of an ABLE account. So think of it like transferring money from a savings account to a checking account to be able to spend it. So if somebody is looking to open up an ABLE account and they are going to actively use the money, you know, for more daily expenses. Let's say they're working and buying gas at the, you know, gas station. And I mean, I love breakfast at the gas station, but like food at the gas station, or just again, using it more for daily expenses like a checking account. We find that Fidelity can be a bit more of a hassle to spend some of the money from the account. But yeah, a lot of these are very similar. Like I mentioned earlier, most states really use a lot of the same back-end systems. And yes, there's investments and fees, and all of those need to be considered. But it's really important to consider the why of what you're doing and making it as easy, you know, as possible for the individual. So.
Okay, we are on to the final part of this presentation before Andrew walks through the opening of an ABLE account, which is special needs trusts. And we find it important to talk about special needs trusts because ABLE accounts are one tool that are available in order to make money invisible. Special needs trusts are another tool, and these tools do not always apply in the same situation. So I want everybody to understand what the difference is so that in your own planning, you're able to determine whether you need an ABLE account, whether you need a special needs trust, or as is the answer in most cases, you need both. Special needs trust basics. A special needs trust makes money invisible, just like the ABLE account, in order to meet low income and asset limits for public benefits like SSI and Medicaid. You'll notice here, in addition to asset limits, I added income limits. So a special needs trust, a first-party special needs trust, as we'll talk about, can actually reduce somebody's countable income in order to be eligible for benefits, as well as assets, whereas an ABLE account only makes assets invisible. There's three types of special needs trusts generally. There's a first-party special needs trust, often called a D4A, or an OBRA 93 account, a third-party special needs trust, and a pooled trust, which usually applies for people that are over the age of 65. So I'm not going to talk about that one tonight. So here's a chart that I hope is helpful that you can refer back to compare a first-party trust to a third-party trust. A first-party trust is created by an individual with a disability, a parent, grandparent, guardian, or a court. It's funded with the individual's money. So if someone receives a settlement, if somebody has wages that are accumulating, if someone has Social Security benefits that are accumulating, an individual can put money into a first-party special needs trust to make it invisible. And most often, I would see a first-party special needs trust being used when somebody has more money in their name than they can contribute to an ABLE account in 1 year. So as Andrew mentioned, an ABLE account contribution limit is $15,000 plus some more if someone's working and not contributing to a 401k. If those limits are exceeded and the person has extra money that they still need to make invisible to qualify for benefits, they would need a first-party special needs trust. The money is used for the primary or sole benefit of the person with a disability. It's managed by a trustee who is someone other than the person with the disability. Remember, that was a distinction with ABLE accounts where the person with the disability can manage it themselves. And lastly, the remaining funds, just like in an ABLE account, are paid back to any states that provided Medicaid supports. And after that, if there's anything left, to named beneficiaries. So let's contrast this to a third-party trust. A third-party trust is often used as an estate planning tool to receive an inheritance for someone with a disability. It's created by anyone other than the person with a disability. Most typically, it's created by parents as part of their estate plan. So their will, for example, would leave any inheritance to a special needs trust as opposed to a child with a disability outright in order to preserve their benefit eligibility. It's funded with money of anyone other than the person with a disability. So the parents, the siblings, the grandparents, they can all contribute to the trust, but the person with a disability cannot put their own money into this trust. They need the first-party trust if that's applicable. A third-party trust is used for the benefit of a person with a disability, managed by a trustee, and remaining funds go to named beneficiaries. There's no payback, which is why people need to think ahead and plan, because if you have a third-party trust, you have the ability not only to protect the money for the individual that you're leaving it to, but also to make sure there's no payback to the state of Connecticut for any Medicaid services the person might receive. There was a question earlier in the chat for someone in New York. So unfortunately, I can't speak exactly to the New York benefits that you reference in your question, but you said, my child is 5 with a disability. Am I looking into all of this too soon? It may be too soon for an ABLE account, again, but I don't know what the benefit limits are for in New York. But it's not too soon for a third-party special needs trust for anyone to be able to set that up as a way to set aside money that would be invisible for a child with a disability. And I'd encourage you to consult with an attorney in New York about that. And next
It's never
slide.
too
And
early to plan.
correct.
So,
That's right. It's not, it's just, and Andrew said it earlier, so often we have clients that come to us and they're asking about something specific. Do I need this? I heard about an ABLE account. That's what I need or want. And we always have to step back and say, what are your planning goals? What are the needs? And then we make recommendations based on all these tools that are available. And our recommendations are always different for different people, depending upon what they need. But we always have recommendations because there are always things to do to have a plan in place.
has anyone came to you specifically and said, I need a D4A trust? I don't even know the other acronym you said, right?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. It's important that we're providing a solution in problems, right? If you came us to all the technical knowledge, right? That's,
Yes.
it's about what it can do for you. So.
Exactly. And this last graphic Andrew had created, I think this is just a good reference for everybody to compare the ABLE account to the first party trust. So you can really see that there are differences between them, and there are circumstances where somebody needs more than one tool. I would say that most typically these days I see my main recommendations are ABLE accounts and third-party supplemental needs trusts. ABLE accounts for the individual's own resources so they can maintain their own benefits when they're receiving money that's going to put them over the asset limits, and the third-party trust for any inheritance that's going to be received. The first-party trust, I only use today in more limited circumstances where someone has more money that they need to contribute to make invisible in order to maintain benefits. So it's not unheard of, but ever since ABLE accounts came out, it's a far less popular tool. And lastly, estate planning is important and ties into what we're talking about, because wills, for example, are what ultimately speak to and work with a special needs trust. So it's important that parents have their documents in place, as well as grandparents or other people that may want to leave an inheritance to someone with a disability. And likewise, it's important for individuals, parents, as well as individuals with disabilities themselves to have powers of attorney, advance directive, or supported decision-making agreements, which are in vogue or becoming in vogue and more popular in Connecticut. Andrew and I have given other presentations on that and happy to do so in the future. And reviewing your beneficiary designations to make sure that everything is passing in the way that you intend. Andrew, I'll pose this question to you. What happens to the money in an ABLE account if someone passes away?
In the vast majority of states, that the state has a right to recover and seek payback for expenses that were paid. And what I would say to that is, that's one of the reasons why we find that an ABLE account is not the place for a vast large sum of money. On the other hand, if there's a weighing of how important that is versus the flexibility. So, we don't think that there should be no money in an ABLE account. We do think it's worth it to be able to, provide access to money. Even like your cell phone breaks, right? You need to request permission from the special needs trust to be able to send it to you. A lot of things we take for granted of being able to have money and being able to spend it. So.
And then there's a question, can money in an ABLE account be used for the individual's funeral? The answer is yes, but it's important to do a prepaid funeral. So use those funds before the individual passes away, because the states that provided Medicaid benefits have that first right to receive the balance of funds. So in many cases, and I won't say in all because it does vary state by state, but in many cases, you may not be able to use remaining funds for a funeral before the state is paid back.
So are there any questions? We're here for a bit more. I'm going to try, we're going to stay on. I'm going to stop the presentation. I'm going to open. We're going to go through an ABLE account opening. It's one example of one state. I'm going to just show everyone how, easy and simple it is. And if people would prefer me to go a little bit slower because they're following along, I have 6 monitors. If somebody has 2, maybe they could have one open and the other open. It again will also be recorded. So I'm going to, again, go through. I just want to give everyone a minute to also ask any other questions they might have, because I also find it's a bit easier once you've seen, the process and really relatively how simple it is to go online and open an ABLE account. And if there's any questions that we missed, it's not because you're on a blacklist or something. It's just because we missed it. So, feel free to ask it again. And again, does an ABLE account is, an interest bearing account. Depending on the account you open, there's interest. Banks are pretty much paying nothing as far as interest, or there are underlying investment options, a few to choose from based upon your level of risk. If anyone's invested in a 401k, there's usually, or even a 529, there's one based upon their age or level of risk. So that's something, an option that can be chosen. That is something that I'll say it's important to discuss with somebody, the use of funds, your financial situation, risk tolerance. I feel like I'm missing 1 or 2 financial disclaimers in there I should probably give, but consult with someone about that, how to invest. So
There's another question. If someone retires and their child gets disabled adult child benefits, does the retiree get less benefits? No, this is a separate benefit that is based upon the parent's benefit, but does not reduce the parent's benefit. Another question, I have a 529 account for my 4-year-old. Would it be beneficial to open an ABLE account as well? Which account do you recommend? Andrew, I'll give that one to you.
So I always like to say that you never know how an individual is going to turn out to be, let alone 4 versus 17, 18, even 30. I think a lot are still figuring it out. So I would say it's most important with any plan to keep as much flexibility as possible. So I would lean towards doing the 529, knowing that if in a few years from now, assuming the balance was below 15,000, you could always move into an ABLE account. Also keep in mind that traditional 529 plans can be used for up to $10,000 for private education under 18, not just for college. So there might actually be, even prior to 18, more uses to use an ABLE account for somebody with a disability. So my recommendation would be to contact a qualified professional and have an overview plan on what makes sense for your individual circumstances. But I would say the vast majority of the time, we recommend that somebody does keep contributing to the traditional 529, although having some money in an ABLE account is not a bad idea. Can everyone see my screen with stable account open?
Yes.
Okay, so this is stableaccount.com. We are going to walk through the opening of an ABLE account. We're going to go through it. I'm going to open one for me. And if you try to steal my identity later, I will be entering at least some level of false information. I encourage you not to do this. We did reach out to Stable and let them know with their permission that we would be submitting an account with some fake information. It's not something I would encourage you to do in your spare time. At the top, I clicked on open an account, open a Stable account. I personally never read the plan disclosure documents or terms of service. If I don't know anyone who has, but I encourage you to read them. So I clicked the box saying that I read them. I actually probably have read them before. Most people just click. I entered my email. Actually, I'm going to enter this email, and then this is also the email where you can find me, by the way, Andrew at planetacrossspectrum.com. I click get started. And I'm going to answer that I am the beneficiary. I am the beneficiary, but given that most of the time, especially a lot of this call, ABLE accounts are open for parents, and that's a bit more involved. How about we go through and open it with me not being the beneficiary to show everyone. And I'm going to open it for Kathleen. So
Thank you.
you're so welcome. And the social is not a real social. I don't know Kathleen's. So I will make sure that even the fake birthday keeps her, at a, not too old, of course, right? How's this, Kathleen? I think that's a good age.
It's a little off,
Okay.
but that's fine.
Yeah, well, at least it's off younger, right? Not older, right?
Right.
So I'm just typing in the address. If I'm going too fast, Kathleen, I can't see the chat at the moment. So if there is anything, let me know.
There's someone that's worried that you're not going to be able to access your account number when you sign up for Stable. And then someone else asked, so they said, write it down. Somebody else said, which account did you say had a debit card attached to it?
Stable, the one that we're opening today, is the one that makes the debit card easier to use. Fidelity, think of it as you have a savings account and a checking account. Stable, think of it as like you have a checking account that pays interest. So it's kind of all in one is the closest analogy I can come up with. I just filled in my information as the authorized legal representative. So as a parent of Kathleen, I am able to, even without any guardianship or conservatorship, I am able to open an account. And I filled in my information here. I can check whether I live with Kathleen or not. And they're going to ask whether I'm employed and what kind of work that I do. And the reason for this is the financial industry has a lot of things in anti-money laundering. We essentially need to make sure that you're not a terrorist. So that is the reason we have to ask some verification questions. So as you can see, we are on step 3 of 6. I don't even think it's been 10 minutes yet, right? Look how easy
Right.
it is, even with some jokes in the middle. So what option applies to the beneficiary? So as we discussed, having SSI or SSDI makes the beneficiary automatically eligible. However, if the individual is not receiving those, you are able to check this box and you're able to self-certify that person has a diagnosis meeting the criteria for an ABLE account. So I am going to give Kathleen a congenital or anomaly. I don't even, I can't even say it right, but we'll give Kathleen one of these as an example to open an ABLE account. And the disability is permanent. And here you can see where they give you the option. You can open as, again, conservator, parent, legal guardian, power of attorney. So I'm going to open here. And here we're certifying a few boxes. You should read all of these. They are important. Remember that the disability occurred prior to 26. That doesn't mean the individual knew about it. So autism is a great example where you're born with autism. You don't develop it due to the COVID vaccine, I promise. So, autism, even if it's diagnosed at 30, you were born with it. So therefore, even a diagnosis of autism at 30, you still are eligible for an ABLE account because you had it prior to 26. I'm checking a few more boxes. It's asking me to verify my identity based upon public information. But here we are where we are verified as an individual. And now there's the communication preferences.
So this is asking me whether I want statements, quarterly statements. Email me when quarterly statements can be viewed and downloaded, but send my tax forms via mail. I think I want that one, or you don't want communications. Yes, I'd like site updates, my mailing address, create your login. So this is the very last screen. Oh, that's very strong. All right, there we go.
Green is good. So there we go. That was it.
All right, I did it.
So we opened, I think, 2 ABLE accounts in 15 minutes. So, very, very easy. And if you run into questions, we find they can usually be addressed. So there is a question that I want to ask, because I love this question from Marisol. And oh yes, by the way, I see the person who asked the question about Stable Ohio, and actually I do think that was a bug and something that I did help that person address with Stable. So thank you for joining us and fixing it. So, but on Marisol with Husky C and working disabled, I love this question because it's such a great and empowering answer. Kathleen, do you want to take it or do you want me to?
You're so excited, so you go ahead.
Okay. If you have a disability and you're in a high paying job but need Husky C, would you need a special needs trust to help hide income and transfer some into an ABLE account to make the money more liquid? I love this question because it's almost certainly no. And that's because Connecticut has a working disabled program, like most states do. They have some sort of program. The rules are going to be different. But in Connecticut, you can make up to $70,000 a year if you're on our Husky C. We also call it MedConnect or SO5, just because we want more acronyms to make your life more difficult. But in all seriousness, you can make up to $75,000 a year and keep your Medicaid, your Husky C, if you're on that program. You're also then allowed to have $10,000 in a bank account instead of $1,600 or $2,000, and you can save as much as you would like for retirement. So, I mean, I consider $75,000 to be a pretty, decent paying job. I don't know if that helps answers Marisol's question. If the individual is making more than 75,000, again, congratulations. But it might get a bit more complicated to hide income. But generally speaking, you might not need, either. You can work with the disability and make money. So that's very important to consider as well.
Then someone else asked, just to clarify, is it possible to have an ABLE account and a third-party trust at the same time? Yes, and it's frequent. And the reason is that the third-party trust serves a very different function from the ABLE account, which is to hold an inheritance. So an ABLE account is not going to hold an inheritance, nor should it, because the ABLE account has, number one, contribution limits, but number two, a payback. A third-party special needs trust doesn't have any payback to any state, even if Medicaid benefits are provided for an individual's entire lifetime. So that third-party trust is really important to at least hold the inheritance, and the ABLE account may also be needed to qualify for those benefit programs.
And I mean, if there's any other questions, we'll hang on. If you have, Kathleen, you want to type your email and or contact information in the chat. And if the YouTube video is there, we'll share that info in the video, but just for the chat. If you're not sure which one of us to reach out to, feel free to both or pick one of us. We'll direct to the other if there's, one of us where it makes more sense. Commonly we find, somebody will come to me and I'll be like, no, you really should talk to Kathleen first. Or, sometimes Kathleen will get and like, I really think you should talk to Andrew. So, we definitely work well together and try to provide, good information So if you're unsure, or just copy both of us.
Thank you very much, everybody. And again, like Andrew said, we're here as resources. So if you have questions, feel free to follow up, and we're happy to walk through your planning with you.